Hello my yarny friends, I'm Sara Sach and welcome back to my crochet channel. Today's video we're going to be making the Santa bandana that can be used for your pets. This one of course is designed for dogs, but it can be used on a cat or other animals. Now the original pattern that I wrote back in 2015, that was like 8 years ago, only had 3 sizes. And so what we've done is we've retested and updated the pattern to include 5 sizes. So it's from extra small all the way up to extra large. Extra small fits a 2 to 7 pound dog, which is about 8 inches across here. Now, the small fits about an 8 to 15 pound and is about 10 to 12 inches. The medium fits about a 16 to 30 pound dog and is about 14 to 16 inches. The large is about 31 to 50 pounds and measures about 18 to 24 inches around. And the extra large will fit your 51 and larger dogs and measures about 35 inches around. Now, one thing you need to remember is a 5-pound Chihuahua, their neck is going to be different than a 5-pound miniature bulldog. So keep that in mind when you're doing your bandanas for your dogs. The best thing to do is to grab that tape measure and measure their neck, because you're going to need this distance, and then of course add the extra for the ties. We keep our ties nice and short because we don't want it getting caught in their teeth or their toenails. And I'll explain more about that as we go along. All right, so I'm going to be showing you how to make the extra small size because I'm going to be making one for Maximo. This one is the small size because Rosie's neck is just a little bit bigger than Maximo's, my 2 Chihuahuas. All right, but don't worry, I'm going to give you information on how to make all of them with the stitch counts, but also you can find all this information, sizing, measurements, stitch counts, and pictures on that blog. And of course, I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. We're making our bandana out of a medium weight number 4 acrylic yarn. And I had this sparkle yarn on hand, and that's why I used it to update our pattern. I think the original one I used sparkle yarn as well. So I'm not going to make the red one since I already have one in red for Rosie. I'm going to do it in green, and I'm going to use the green where I have all this red. And then I'm going to use the red for the belt. Okay, if you're doing it in red, you're going to need black for your belt, or whatever color you want to use for the belt. You could use yellow. All right, then you're going to need a fuzzy color for around here. Now I'm going to be doing my straps in the red also, where this one I used just a white medium number 4 acrylic yarn. And then we use a fuzzy yarn for the edge just to give it just a little bit of a Santa Claus look. You don't have to do that. You can stick with your medium weight number 4 if you want to. This is just a bulky number 5. I used the H hook. I didn't go up a size, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Just to add a little bit more fuzziness to it, you could use any of your fun furs that you want if you want to add a little bit of fuzziness to it. I'm actually going to use this. This is just an I love this bulky or chunky yarn from Hobby Lobby that I had left from another project. I'm going to use that just on the bottom portion of my bandana. I'm going to use the red up here, the red here, the green here, and then the yellow around here. All right. And as far as the amounts, you're going to need anywhere from 1 ounce to 2 or 3 ounces, depending on the size bandana that you decide to make. All right, now let's talk about the buckle. The buckle is just a plastic buckle that looks like this. I got this in the fabric department in the buttons, and they also have bigger buttons as well that are buckles as well. And so they have round ones, they have oval, and they have square. And I just put it on and sew it in place. I do want to remind you that if your dog is a chewer, don't use these. Just grab some silver sparkle or some gold and make a buckle on your own, okay? I really like using these. My dogs are not chewers. And another thing, I sew it nice and secure so they cannot get a hold of it. All right, so that's something you need to keep in mind if you want to use a button buckle. I have seen these also over in the scrapbooking department, but I really like these that I found in the button department. I found these at my local Hobby Lobby over by the sewing where all the buttons are kept. Now we're going to stitch with our H hook, which is a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need a needle for weaving in ends and sewing on that buckle, and then again you're going to need a pair of scissors. On this particular bandana, we're going to be starting with the top and forming the straps first, and then we'll work down and decrease down to our point. All right, so we're going to begin with our slip knot, and we're going to chain. Now, the amount of chains depends on what size you're going to make. All right, so for the smallest size, extra small, you're going to chain 36 chains. For small, 51. For medium, chain 66. For the large, chain 81, and for the extra large, chain 96. Now, you may need to adjust that if you have an even larger dog that you want to fit, or say a goat, because I do have friends who make these for goats and other animals. All right, I'm going to be making the extra small size, so I'm going to chain 36 chains, and remember, chain this initial chain just a little bit loose. Now I know this probably looks really big, but remember, we're making the straps, and then we'll come in and make the bandana. All right, so I have chained my 36 chains. For all sizes, for row 1, you're going to single crochet in the second chain from the hook, and then single crochet in each of those chains all the way across. Because again, we're forming the straps or the ties and the top band of our bandana. One single crochet in each of those chains, working all the way across. I stitched one single crochet in each of my chains across. We started in the second chain from the hook. So you're going to have one less single crochet than you started with. I started with 36, so I have 35 single crochets, and it's the same for all the sizes. We're going to chain 1 and turn, and we're going to stitch right in that first single crochet and stitch a single crochet. The chain 1 does not count as a stitch. And so we're going to single crochet in each of those single crochets all the way across. I have completed row 2, and I have 35 single crochets just like I did on row 1. Now if you're making the extra small size like I am, I'm not going to repeat row 2 anymore. This is how thick my band is going to be. And that includes my ties. If you're making the medium or large size, you're going to want to repeat this row 2, one more time. If you're making the extra large size, you're going to want to repeat row 2 more times. The thickness of the band is really up to you, how thick you want that. But as we tested the pattern, we found that as the bandana got bigger, we preferred a thicker band. And of course, that's up to you. But for the pattern, for the extra small size, we're not going to repeat row 2. For the medium and large, we're going to repeat row 2 one more time. And for the extra large, you're going to repeat row 2 more times. Once your band is as thick as you want it, chain 1 and turn. Now we're going to place some slip stitches on this one side and then begin forming the bandana portion of our bandana. And since I'm doing the extra small, I'm going to stitch 10 slip stitches. You go in, pull up a loop, then pull that loop through the loop on your hook. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now we're going to stitch the bandana, the beginning of the bandana. So we're going to stitch a single crochet. All right, so again, the stitch count is different. So depending on the size you're making, the stitch count for these single crochets is going to be different. The extra small, I'll stitch 15 single crochets. For the small, I'll stitch 20. For the medium, 25. For the large, 30. And for the extra large, 35 single crochets. So again, since I'm stitching the extra small, I'm going to stitch 15 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 single crochets. All right, and then we're going to leave those last stitches unworked, and you should have the same amount over here that you had on this side that we slip stitched. So I have 10 slip stitches, 15 single crochets, and the last 10 stitches are unworked. We don't stitch in those. Now just a reminder, if those ties look extremely small to you, that's because they're only intended to tie into a nice little knot to measure the size of your dog's neck and just slide it right on. And I'll show you that at the end of the video, how to tie that and how to slide that onto your dog or cat's neck. All right, so for our next row, we're going to cut our yarn because we're changing colors, and we're going to bring in our main color, and I'm using green. We'll chain 1, snug everything down there, and turn. All right, so now we're going to be stitching half double crochets. So I'm going to stitch 1 half double crochet in each of those 10 single crochets. So yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through all 3. And we'll stitch 1 half double crochet in each of those 10, or the amount that you stitched for the size that you're making. $11, $12, $13, $14, and 15 half double crochets and chain 1. And this is how your bandana will look. Depending on what size you made, of course, it will be bigger. All right, so I made the extra small size, so I have 15 half double crochets. So now we're going to repeat this row, which is row 5, for 2 more rows. Chain 1, 1 half double crochet in each half double crochet across. And again, the amount that you stitch is, of course, according to the size that you're making. So we're repeating row 5 for 2 more rows. I completed those 2 rows of repeating row 5, so I have 3 rows of half double crochet in my main color. Now I was going to do the belt in red, but I decided, since I'm doing the trim in that bright yellow, to make my belt in the bright yellow. So I grabbed some bright yellow yarn, and we'll join that in. Chain 1, and now we're just going to repeat row 5 for 2 more rows for our belt. And so we'll stitch 1 half double crochet in each of the half double crochets, and we'll do this for 2 rows to form the belt of our bandana. Now the other one I wanted to look like Santa. This one I want to look like an elf. And so I like adding the yellow in there for the belt. But you could do yours black if you wanted to. And I was going to do mine red, but I just changed my mind at the last minute. And I really like it with how it's stitching up with the yellow. All right, so we're stitching 2 rows, just like we did the 3 in green. We're stitching 2 rows in our belt color. I'm doing yellow, and on the Santa style, we did black. So we're repeating row 5 in our belt color for 2 more rows. I stitched those 2 rows of half double crochets for my belt section. You'll notice I did not cut my green yarn or my main color because I'm going to bring it back in. I am going to cut my yellow here because my belt is complete. And now I'm going to bring back in my green. We're just carrying that yarn because we're going to put that nice trim around the edge. So we'll go ahead and chain 1 and turn. Now this is where we begin our decreases to go down to that point for our bandana. And so what you're going to do is we're going to stitch the first 2 half double crochets together. So we'll yarn over, go in the first stitch and pull up a loop. Then we'll go in the next stitch and pull up a loop. You'll have 4 loops on your hook instead of 3. Yarn over and go through all 3 of those loops. I should say all 4 of those loops. Now we're going to stitch 1 half double crochet in each of the half double crochets across until we reach that last 2 half double crochets, and then we'll stitch a half double crochet decrease, or stitching 2 half double crochets together. It's the same thing whether you call it a decrease or stitching them together. It's done the same for this project. All right, so now I'm to the last 2. Yarn over, go in the first stitch and pull up a loop. Go in the next stitch and pull up a loop. We have those 4 loops. Yarn over and go through all 4 and chain 1. So now what will happen is we're going to decrease at the beginning and end of each row on every row as we work our way down. We've chained 1. We're going to turn our work. We'll stitch the first 2 together. Stitch a half double crochet in each of our stitches across until we reach the last 2 on this row. And again, when you're stitching the bigger sizes, you're going to have more stitches in between. All right, this brings us to our last 2 stitches. So we'll stitch those last 2 together, chain 1, and turn. And so you're going to continue to repeat a decrease at the beginning and end, or what we call stitching 2 half double crochets together at the beginning and end of each row until you form that point. All right. And again, you're going to decrease by 1 stitch at the beginning and end of each row. And this is going to form that bandana shape. And see how it's already starting to form that shape? So you'll continue to do that all the way down your bandana. Once you have decreased all the way down, you want to make sure if you end with 2 that you stitch those last 2 together. And we'll cut our yarn. And again, remember, the bigger sizes will have more decreases than the smallest size like I made here. And now what we need to do is go through and weave in all our ends before we add the trim. All right, and you're just going to put that on your needle and weave it in, make it nice and neat. Now, this bandana looks pretty much the same on the front side and the back side. And you can decide which side you like better and make those weave-ins go to the back side. So I've tidied up, weaving all my ends in. And now I want to add that special trim. So what I do is I come over here to that first stitch under the tie and join in my yarn. Just like that. That's where you want to join it in. And what we're going to do is we're going to stitch evenly single crochets, but we're going to chain 1 in between. And by doing that, it gives it just a little bit more curliness. Gives it a little more fluffiness and funness. All right, and you want to make sure on this side that you stitch over where we carried that green yarn. So we're going to chain 1, or we're going to single crochet, chain 1, and try to stitch our stitches evenly. And we want them to be kind of bunchy on this one. I know a lot of times I tell you don't bunch up your stitches, but on this one we kind of want them to be a little bit bunchy. So it just has just a little bit of a fun edge. All right, and you want to try to stitch in the sides of the stitches and not the holes. But of course, that's kind of hard sometimes. And so you just have to do the best that you can. And see how by adding that extra little chain 1 in between, it gives it almost like a curliness. And if you want to chain 2 in there, you certainly can. Remember, you do what works best for you and your idea of the project. All right, we're going to work down here to the corner, or the point, I should say. I'm down to the point, and when you get to that point, you want to single crochet, chain 1, and single crochet right in that point. And that's going to give you a nice move around that point and have it look nice. There we go. And now I'm just going to work back up the other side, single crochet, chain 1 evenly, but a little bit bunched up. So we have a nice, fun looking bandana. So I've stitched up this second side. I'm to that last stitch and I'm going to cut my yarn. All right, now I'm going to go in the bottom of that last stitch. There we go. I'm just going to pull that loop to the back and tie off to the back. That way we get a much nicer and neater finish. And of course we need to weave in these two ends. Now this is a little bit thicker yarn, so I'm going to grab just a little bit thicker of a needle. Alright, so I've got my buckle already. I threaded on some yarn that's the same color as my belt. And so I'm going to go right here and just make that loop. I'm going to grab my crochet hook and pull that end of our tail to the back. All right, now we're going to put our buckle on. And I like to put quite a few stitches on this. I want it to stay nice and secure. Try to center it as best that you can. And so I'll make a few stitches to kind of get it where I want it. And it will stay better if you go through an actual stitch and not a hole. I do want to remind you of that because it will stay a lot more secure. Alright, so then I'll take a look at it. Is it centered? Looks pretty centered to me. And then I'll just make some more stitches. Again, when you're working with animals and you're adding things like this, buttons or buckles or beads or anything, you want to make sure it's on there nice and secure. And if your dog is any kind, or even cat, that messes with things and chews on things and, you know, so that it might come off, don't use it. Okay? You can take another color of yarn and just stitch some long stitches to make a buckle. All right? That's on there nice and secure. So I'm going to come to the back and we're going to tie that on securely with those 3 knots that I like. I like to have 3 knots. I don't know why. Nice and secure. And then cut those tails of yarn. All right, so this is our elf bandana and this is our Santa. And of course you can see they're not the same size. So I have Rosie here and I'm going to show you how to do the bandana. You're going to put it around their neck and just tie a knot. You don't have to remove their collar or anything. And so now this will slide on and off Rosie's head anytime I want her to wear her bandana. And so that's how really easy it is to make these super simple Santa and elf bandanas for any size dog or pet. The main thing is just remember to measure their neck and adjust it as needed.